Good evening. Welcome to the not April Fools, but the April 1st LAFCO meeting of Sacramento County. Introductions.
Mr. Chair, you could do your introduction script.
I don't see that here.
Is this it? Was it? No, that's just
It's that one. Okay. But that's the same as this.
Thank you.
It's the same as this. It says, will the clerk please call roll and establish a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioners Jones,
present.
Commissioner Wickert,
Right here. Thanks.
Commissioner Desmond,
Here.
Commissioner Hume,
Here.
Commissioner Pratton,
Here.
Commissioner Kaplan, and Chair Little.
Here.
You have a quorum with the members that are present.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I will read the introductory script here now.
Thank you.
Welcome to tonight's meeting. Thank you for coming. My name is Commissioner Chris Little. I'm serving as the chair for tonight's meeting of the Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission, also known as LAFCO. Commissioners are locally elected officials who were designated by their respective home agencies to serve on LAFCO. Our role is to oversee boundary changes of cities and special districts, the formation of new agencies, including the incorporation of new cities and districts, and the consolidation or reorganization of special districts or cities. The broad goals of the Commission's directive are to ensure the orderly formation of local governmental agencies, to preserve agricultural and open space lands, and to discourage urban sprawl. Commissions must by law create municipal service reviews and update spheres of influence for each independent local government jurisdiction within their countywide jurisdiction. All our meetings are always open to the public, and regularly scheduled meetings are shown live on Metro Cable 14, webcast on the Metro Cable TV website, and posted on the county's website. Comments are welcome. Please complete a speaker slip and return it to the clerk. Time will be limited to 2 minutes per person to keep the meeting timely. We ask that you address your comments or questions to the Commission. Thank you. First item.
Mr. Chair, may I read the announcement first?
Oh, please.
Thank you. This meeting of the Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission is live and recorded with closed captioning. It is cablecast on Metro Cable Channel 14, the Local Government Affairs channel on the Comcast and DirecTV UVerse cable systems. It is also live streamed at metro14live.saccounty.gov. Today's meeting replays Saturday, April 4th at 2 p.m. on Metro Cable Channel 14. Once posted, the recording of this meeting can be viewed on demand at youtube.com/Metro Cable 14. The Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. The board does not condone the use of profanity, vulgar language, gestures, or other inappropriate behavior during personal attacks or threats directed towards any meeting participant. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to make a public comment and are limited to making one comment per agenda or off-agenda item. Please be mindful of the public comment procedures to avoid being interrupted or disconnected while making your comment. To make a comment in person, please fill out a speaker request form and hand it to clerk staff. The chairperson will open public comments for each agenda or off-agenda item and direct the clerk to call the name of each speaker. When the clerk calls your name, please come to the podium and make your comment. If a speaker is unavailable to make a comment prior to the closing of public comments, the speaker waives their request to speak, and the clerk will file the speaker request form in the record. The clerk will manage the timer and allow each speaker 2 minutes to make a comment. You may send written comments by mail to boardclerk@saccounty.gov. Your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record. If you need an accommodation pursuant to the Americans with Disabilities Act or for medical or other reasons, please see clerk staff for assistance or contact the clerk's office at 874-5451, or by email at boardclerk@saccounty.gov. Thank you in advance for your courtesy and understanding of the meeting procedures. This concludes your announcements, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have any announcements?
I just made the announcement.
Okay.
Item number 1 is the public is encouraged to address the commission concerning any matter not on the agenda. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes. The commission is prohibited from discussing or taking any action on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. We do not have any speaker request forms or in-person speakers for item number 1.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 2 is the consent calendar to approve items 2 through 8.
Mr. Chair, I move consent.
Does anyone have any items they want to remove? No? Okay.
Okay, you may vote. Your motion passes unanimously with all the members present.
Thank you. Next item.
Item number 9 is public hearing to consider and approve the environmental review and on the draft municipal service review and sphere of influence study for Florin County Water District, LAFCO Project 2024-02. We have 2 presenters.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we have 2 of the consultants who are joining us remotely. They will be presenting the item of the staff report and the MSRSOI studies. After that, your policy analyst, Graybo, will have additional information to share with you. And I believe there are representatives from the Florin County Water District who may want to provide comments to you on the study. So for now, I'd like to invite Carol Neiman and Tom Kennedy to make the presentation on your MSRSOI for Florin County Water District.
Thank you, Jose. If you guys give me just a minute, I will bring up the presentation slides, and hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Alrighty, so the slides should be up. So good evening, Chair Little and fellow commissioners. My name is Carol Neiman. I'm an associate with RSG. I'm accompanied today by Mr. Tom Kennedy with Kennedy Water Consulting. We are here this evening to present to you all the Municipal Service Review and Sphere of Influence update for the Florin County Water District. Now, just to set some expectations for the presentation, I'll first get us going with providing an overview of our firm and the efforts made to date, as well as an overview of the district and then a summary of the determinations. Then I'll be passing the presentation over to Mr. Tom Kennedy, who will walk us through the documented challenges and deficiencies we've identified throughout this process. And then I'll help close us out by covering the proposed recommendations for your consideration. Alrighty, and one thing, we will save questions and comments for the end of the presentation. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So RSG is a consulting firm that provides services to cities, special districts, and counties, as well as commissions throughout the state of California. We specialize in LAFCO-related projects that include annexation and reorganization studies, but more importantly, municipal service reviews and sphere of influence updates. We were engaged by Sacramento LAFCO back in March of last year to assist in the preparation of the MSR and sphere update for the Florin County Water District. We've partnered on this effort with Mr. Tom Kennedy with Kennedy Water Consulting, who you'll hear from later. Tom brings over 35 years of experience in water and wastewater systems and served as the technical lead for the infrastructure and system evaluation for the district. And now segueing into the purpose of the municipal service reviews and for the benefit of our audience as well as any newer commissioners, the municipal service reviews are intended to provide an independent evaluation of an agency's service performance, both historically as well as into the foreseeable future. These reviews typically serve 3 primary purposes. The first is they act as an informational resource to the public, as well as decision makers, such as yourselves. Second, they support LAFCO's statutory responsibilities to update spheres of influence for cities and special districts. And third, they help inform future actions related to service delivery, and this can include boundary changes or broader organizational changes such as consolidations, and in some rare cases, dissolutions. So in summary, the MSRs evaluate governance structures, service efficiency, and overall performance for agencies under LAFCO's purview, with a focus on identifying opportunities to improve coordination among service providers in the region, as well as any ways to enhance service delivery when appropriate. So the slide that you see before you today summarizes our project's timeline, as well as some of the key milestones regarding the preparation of the Municipal Service Review and Sphere Update for Florin County Water District. I'll look to try to cover this briefly just to help orient the Commission as well as our audience to the steps that got us to where we are today. And as previously mentioned, RSG and Tom Kennedy were retained by Sacramento LAFCO back in March of last year. Our work began with a series of data collection and document review, followed by a site visit and interview with district staff in May of last year, with the goal to better understand their operations, their infrastructure conditions, as well as their service delivery. I will flag that Tom Kennedy did perform an assessment of some of their wells. He actually visited 7 of the 10, so I did just want to flag that, and he can certainly cover that when we go over some of the observations he made. And then a draft municipal service review was prepared for LAFCO staff's initial review in July of last year, which was then refined and shared with the district in August to get their input. In November of 2025, RSG, Tom Kennedy, LAFCO staff, and the district met to review comments and discuss policy and operational considerations. The report was then revised with an updated administrative draft completed in early 2026 and shared with both LAFCO and the district. The draft was then brought to the Commission as part of your consent calendar in March of this year, thereby opening the formal public comment period. During that time, the district submitted formal comments on March 10th, which LAFCO staff responded to shortly after. The district's comments primarily were related to their recent actions to address some of the cited deficiencies. However, we've determined these fall outside of the Municipal Service Review's review period, which covers 2020 through 2024. So no further revisions were made. Accordingly, the report also reflects a snapshot in time, as you will say, for the district during that period. And we did acknowledge some of the ongoing efforts they have made based on information they provided us. Alrighty, so now that we've covered how we got here, I'll provide a brief overview of the district just in terms of its services, service area, and some of its key operational characteristics. So Florin County Water District was formed in 1959 and operates as an independent special district providing potable water services to approximately 10,000 residents, all within its 2.5 square mile jurisdictional boundary, which you see on the map to the right of this slide. The district currently services a total of 2,443 connections, which consists primarily of residential customers. Overall, the district functions as a small, single service provider with a focused service area, which is important context as we evaluate its service capacity, infrastructure needs, and financial conditions in the determinations that follow. So this slide summarizes the statutory framework that guides municipal service reviews and sphere of influence updates. Consistent with Government Code Sections 56425 and 56430 CKH, LAFCOs are required to evaluate both the sphere of influence and municipal service review determinations as part of the process, which you see covered on this slide. Now, with respect to the sphere of influence, the analysis focuses on land use patterns, service needs, and the district's capacity to provide services within its current and planned boundaries, including consideration of any disadvantaged unincorporated communities, which we refer to as DUCs. For the Municipal Service Review, the analysis is broader and it evaluates service performance across several key areas, including population and growth, infrastructure capacity, financial ability to provide services, opportunity for any shared facilities or services, and overall accountability of the agency. Now, these determinations combined form the analytical foundation for the findings and recommendations presented in the service review before you today, and ultimately support LAFCO's decision-making regarding the district sphere and service responsibilities. So with this framework in mind, I will now walk through a summary of the sphere of influence determinations, then those will be followed by the municipal service review determinations. However, before I do so, I would like to note that the district has not yet had a sphere of influence formally adopted by the Commission to date. Accordingly, the determinations presented here are based on the proposed coterminous sphere of influence that RSG and Tom Kennedy are recommending, which will be discussed in more detail later in this presentation. So the slide here summarizes the 5 key findings for the sphere of influence determinations. First, and this is in terms of the present and planned land uses, the district service area is predominantly residential with no major planned developments that would significantly alter its service demands. Second, and this is regarding the present and probable need for facilities and services, the proposed coterminous sphere of influence reflects both the current conditions as well as the anticipated future needs with no expansion-driven demand identified at this time. And third, while the district has adequate groundwater supply to meet existing demands, there are deficiencies in its facilities which will require ongoing investments as well as improvements. Fourth, the proposed coterminous sphere of influence appropriately captures the relevant social and economic communities of interest, aligning with the district's existing service area as well as its customer base. And finally, and this is with respect to the disadvantaged unincorporated communities or DUCs, our team has identified 6 that are located within and contiguous to the district's jurisdictional boundary as well as their proposed sphere of influence. However, our assessment indicates that there are no indications of any unmet needs or any service gaps. I'll provide some more information on the next slide. So what you see here is a map of the district's boundary, which is reflected in that shaded blue color. And then the gray shaded areas reflect the 6 ducts that we have identified. I would just like to reiterate that our review suggests that they are currently receiving critical services and no unmet needs were identified at this time. Alrighty, so now I'll transition into the municipal service review determinations, which as a reminder, these assess how effectively the district is providing services across those several key areas. And I'll cover these on the next 2 slides. But before doing so, I do want to note that there's definitely some overlap between these determinations and the ones we just covered, particularly in areas such as growth, service needs, and DUCs. So some of the findings that we discuss here will reinforce what was previously presented. Additionally, some of the challenges that are identified in these determinations are done at a very high level, but we will cover them in more detail later in the presentation. Alrighty, so first, and this is in terms of growth, population, and housing, the district service area is largely built out and only limited residential growth is anticipated over the next 5 years. Second, and this is consistent with the prior slide, we identified those 6 ducts, but as we've mentioned, we did not identify any unmet needs or service gaps in these areas. And then third, this is regarding the capacity and adequacy of services. So the district currently has a sufficient groundwater supply to meet existing demands. However, there are infrastructure-related constraints, specifically regarding their aging well facilities and their undersized distribution system that may pose challenges to maintaining service levels over time without continued investment. And then continuing with the remaining sphere of influence, municipal service review determinations. And this is regarding the financial ability of the district to continue to provide its services. We've determined that the district's financial position presents some risk. Particularly, this is due to declines in revenue that followed a prior rate adjustment. It definitely limits the district's financial flexibility, as well as its ability to address infrastructure needs without careful fiscal management. And now in terms of opportunities for shared facilities, there may be potential for the district to use the Fletcher Farm Community Center for meetings or administrative functions. And lastly, regarding accountability, the district has certainly made some progress in improving its transparency. However, there are some key financial and governance documents that are not consistently kept up to date or readily accessible on their website. So this definitely remains an area for improvement of the district. And now with that overview of the determinations, I would now like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Tom Kennedy, who would walk us through the identified challenges as well as deficiencies we've noted in this service review. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Before I speak, I would like to thank Mr. Leggett and the staff at Florin for their graciousness to host us there and to give us the information we needed. I think this situation is not a reflection on the people who work there, but the situation and organization that they're within and the challenges that organization has. So next slide. I think it's important as we preface this discussion to remember the grand jury report findings from 2024, which kind of set the tone for both this MSR and some of the things that we observed during our review. The grand jury identified a number of issues regarding their ability to conduct meetings, dealing with their posting of agendas, their internal board dynamics. And so there was, as we're all aware of, the grand jury report had a lot of breadcrumbs to follow. And so collectively, these things created a system where there was periods of inaction or dysfunction amongst the board, so they couldn't take the appropriate actions that would have been required to meet their needs. There's a number of internal operational challenges. In the past had been a lot of board seat vacancies, which affected quorums and continuity. That's mainly been resolved, although over the summer, I think there was another board vacancy and then it was quickly refilled. One of the big challenges they have there is with staffing issues. As the report indicates, we reviewed their salaries and compared them to neighboring water and wastewater agencies, and they're well below market, significantly below market. And as such, as employees get certifications when they're working in the water space, they bounce out of Florin and go work at different agencies. So it makes retention of skilled employees very difficult. And so that process creates a lack of in-house expertise, and it also constrains their administrative capacity. When you're well below market in wages, when people build skill sets, if anybody on the commission is in the water and wastewater sector, they know that the act of poaching employees from other agencies is a very active market, let's just say. And so at the initial stages of our data collection, there was still a lot of data transparency issues regarding the website and audits. However, over the last year, they've made notable improvements to that. I think that there is meaningful progress underway toward improving transparency in governments, but they're still in the early stages, and yet they're not sufficiently mature to assess their long-term effectiveness. Next slide, please. So this table, there's a lot of findings in the report. So this table talks a bit about the facilities, equipment, and infrastructure. As part of this process, I was in communication with the State Water Resources Control Board Division of Drinking Water, where I spoke to the lead engineer as well as the inspector who've been out to the facility. Their reports were part of the data we looked at, and there's excerpts from those reports in there. Those reports, I've had a lot of those reports done on systems I've run over the last several decades. These ones are very, very challenging and point out some significant challenges. I mean, they've used terms like running on the razor's edge and things like that, which is not something you really want to hear about it. The system is not super old, but it's not super new either. The wells have been around for a long time, and they're really the best ones are in fair condition, most are in poor condition. That doesn't mean they don't pump water, but it just means that there's a clear lack of ongoing programmatic maintenance. There's also a challenge with capital replacement planning. There's no master plan or anything there. Now, there was a project underway with an engineering firm during our visit, and it's continued through the year, but the final report we've never received. I've not seen it. We've seen some excerpts from it, but to my knowledge, maybe it has been since the last time I checked, that hasn't been produced. When you have an agency that has that, like a water and wastewater, which is an extremely asset dependent service delivery thing, you need to have good handle on your condition of your assets and good planning for how you're going to replace them and, more importantly, finance them. I think that one of the challenges that we saw there, and at least in my perspective, I know that the folks at Florin might have a different perspective, is that they're reliant on underground water as their storage system, which is great. And there's a lot of water there. Their water rights are not an issue here, but there's only 10 pumps. If all 10 pumps are running, or wells, if all 10 wells are running, looking through the reports from the Division of Drinking Water, I didn't find a report that showed that they ever went there where there were 10 wells available, and there weren't 10 wells available when we were there either. Each well has a maximum of 5,000 gallons capacity above ground storage and a hydropneumatic tank. Very small amount as far as water agencies go. So if at the maximum they'd have about 50,000 gallons above ground, power goes out on a hot summer day, they're going to run through that in about 30 minutes. Now they do have backup power systems, but not for all the wells, and there's some of them are in different stages of conditions, and so you might be able to get one or two wells on. But I think that's a real threat if power goes out. Now there could be arguments either way. Well, that hasn't happened, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. I think that there's real challenges on how to meet the peak summer demands, and while they've made it through, I think that's where the language that the Deep Division of Drinking Water used about operating on the razor's edge is a challenge. We were also asked to look at fire protection issues. They do have an appropriate number of hydrants, but a lot of the water mains are smaller. And looking at the fire flow test reports done both internally by the Florence staff and also by Sacramento Metropolitan Fire Agency, there's a number of them that are below fire standards, not just below the current standards, which could be up to 2,500 gallons a minute, but many came in under 1,000 gallons a minute, which is pretty low. And so when you have a system like this where you've got a limited supply of water above ground, you've got mains that are smaller, and then you've got different sorts of hydraulic constraints. This is one of those things to where you present a higher risk than normal for fire protection. Next slide, please. So from a financial and operational standpoint, the big challenge they've had, and I'm sure the staff at Florence will tell you, is that if they had enough money, they could do a lot of these things better. I think that the fact that their rate increase from a number of years ago got overturned in court and cut their revenues back significantly, put them in an even worse situation. When we were looking at it initially last year, their operational revenues were only going to be a little over half of their operating expenses. And so they're burning through what small reserves they had already. And so what happens then is that you really have no money available to make any of the infrastructure improvements you need. I think that the pressure limitations that are there are fine for day-to-day operations, and sure, in many cases they will meet the fire flow needs of a particular individual fire. But in a significant fire event, which unfortunately we see more and more here in California, this can be a real challenge. But one of the other big things that's going on everywhere in the groundwater world is PFAS. It's coming. It's already present in some areas. There's TCE contamination in some of their wells. They were in the process at a well offline. They were in the process of getting some PFAS equipment in, which costs $500,000 to $1 million a well to install, and that is unlikely to be contained into just one well. Those PFAS travels through groundwater basins, and so the likelihood of other wells being affected by it is high. And so having appropriate planning in place and finances in place in order to deal with that in a systematic way is important. Those plans and financial plans weren't present during our review. Another significant challenge that I looked at is that when you go to their wells, when water comes out of the ground, it's generally clean water, except for it has some sort of contamination. But in order to be put into the distribution system, state law requires that there is a disinfectant added, chlorine or chloramines, into the water system. That's to protect and keep the water sanitary as it passes through the pipes and into homes. Florence has such facilities, but they're fairly rudimentary in that it's a small feeder pump and a small tank of chlorine that just kind of turns on when the well comes on to feed a certain amount of chlorine in there. The real challenge is there's no monitoring system on these. Most water agencies have what's called SCADA systems or remote monitoring systems, so they can tell that, hey, is my well pumping properly? Hey, is my chlorine moving properly? Is it all being done correctly? At Florence, there is no monitoring. Someone drives by once a day, and frequently not even on weekends, to take a look at it. Hey, is the pump running? Has the chlorine all been pumped out of this barrel, or do we need to add more? Or is, hey, no chlorine's gone out during a given day? What I see from this is that, let's say an operator comes over on Friday afternoon to make his rounds, looks at it, everything's great, but then, Friday evening, the pump fails for whatever reason. There's one thing about pumps and spinning and mechanical objects is they all fail at some point. There's not one that's ever been running forever. And so in that situation, that well would be producing water and putting it into the system, maybe Saturday, Sunday, and even until the guy got back Monday without appropriate chlorine disinfection. I think that while one of the arguments from Florence was that no, it'll be mixed with the water in the system. Unfortunately, that's just not how chlorination works and how plug flow works in pipelines. There is a real and present risk of putting improperly disinfected water into the system without an appropriate monitoring system. Now, if someone was to make more frequent visits and to make sure to be there on weekends to make sure, you could reduce that risk. But most agencies have installed simple monitoring systems that have come way down in cost over the years. And so that's one of the recommendations to do that. I think that you know, when you look at the big picture, the PFAS and the underground contamination presents a real risk to the water supply situation. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges on compliance is that they haven't consistently met Government Code Section 26909, which requires them to have timely audits and financial reporting. This was identified clearly in our report. And so we still don't have all the audits from the period in question that we were looking at. And so I know that those are underway and they've been made progress to get there. But it's one of those things with an agency is that if you're not monitoring your own finances, it's hard to know where you are and how to plan. I think there's the other thing is that the revenue streams, the service charges and fees, which were roughly $20 a month per household, unmetered, is a challenge. I think that there's a real challenge in that regard, which I understand there's been a Prop 218 hearing and those rates have been changing. I think that that'll be excellent to see, and that should improve the situation. When you look at the CIP and asset management, as I mentioned, there is also a real challenge because there is no real plan. Maybe there has been one done since we were there, maybe we haven't. When you combine the lack of asset management, administrative controls, and a lack of monitoring systems, you end up with situations like a few years ago where a valve was inadvertently left open and a huge amount of water, about 50% of their total annual demand, passed into the city of Sacramento unnoticed for 12 to 16 months. And they were producing that water and chlorinating it and never got a revenue for it. When I see something like that, to me, that's a symptom of an agency that doesn't have appropriate administrative oversight, system monitoring, or operational controls, because you shouldn't have that much water disappear from your system unbilled, unnoticed in a situation like this. There should be someone in there who's looking at the chemical bills when you're buying, hey, why are we buying so much chlorine? Or your power bills, why did our power go up so much? Or have your meters and you'd be able to tell that, hey, we produce way more water than we metered, where to go. The combination of a lack of operational and financial oversight led to a situation where that much water could be lost for such a long time. And I think it's off to you, Carol.
Alrighty, thank you, Tom. So building off those findings or observations from Tom, I would now like to walk us through the proposed sphere of influence update as well as the related recommendations. But before doing so, I do just want to make it clear that the recommendations that are reflected in this municipal service review reflect the analysis prepared by RSG and Mr. Tom Kennedy and are separate from the recommendations that are being presented from staff, which they will cover after our presentation. And then before I do transition into the discussion on the proposed sphere of influence and recommendations, I do want to briefly highlight the district's provisions of out-of-area or extraterritorial services, as this context helps set the stage for some of those recommendations. So as shown here, the district currently provides services to 3 parcels that are located outside of its jurisdictional boundary, and these are also located within the boundary for the Sacramento County Water Agency, which is another water provider in the region. So if you look on that map there, you'll see those 3 parcels and those 2 call-out bubbles, and then that shaded red area represents Sacramento County Water Agency's boundary. So 2 of these parcels, the postal office and the residential parcel, began receiving services in 1991 and 2007, respectively. Now, the postal office parcel, this is the one that's indicated in red to the east of the district's boundary. Its services predates the 2001 effective date of Government Code Section 56133 of CKH, which requires formal LAFCO approval for any agency to provide services outside of its boundaries or sphere. As such, this connection has been considered grandfathered in and not subject to the current, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this one is the one that is not subject to the current statutory restrictions of out-of-area service extensions. However, the residential parcel, and this is the one that's highlighted in the green call-out, located south of the district's boundary. They began receiving services in 2007, and so they are therefore subject to the provisions of Government Code Section 56133 requirements. And based on our review, there's no indication that LAFCO has previously provided the district approval to provide these services to this parcel. So as a result, we are flagging this as an area for potential corrective action, which will be reflected in the recommendations that follow. And now the third parcel is the Shell gas station parcel, which is that tiny little blue box that you see east of the district's boundary. It does present a slightly different situation, only because our mapping and review of the parcel suggests that it falls within the district's jurisdictional boundary. However, neither RSG, LAFCO staff, the county, the district, or the Board of Equalization were able to confirm any formal annexation was pursued or occurred for this parcel. Therefore, we are also flagging this area as another potential corrective action, which is detailed in the recommendations. So now with that context in mind, I'll transition into the proposed sphere of influence and related recommendations. Alrighty, so as we documented earlier, the district does not currently have a formally adopted sphere of influence. Accordingly, this is not necessarily an update to an existing sphere, but rather the establishment of the district's initial sphere of influence. So RSG and Mr. Tom Kennedy, we recommend the commission proceed to establish a coterminous sphere of influence for the district, meaning the sphere would align with the district's existing jurisdictional boundary, which we have provided a map to reflect this to the right of this slide. Now, we believe that this designation or approach is appropriate given the district's service area we've determined is largely built out. There are no significant planned growth areas, and the district is really currently focused on maintaining and improving services within its existing footprint. That said, we are recommending there's one targeted refinement to that otherwise coterminous boundary. Specifically, we recommend that the Shell gas station parcel, which we just discussed, is excluded from that proposed sphere of influence. And that ties back to the lack of formal annexation documentation. So we believe excluding this parcel from the sphere ensures that it accurately reflects the area where the district has clear jurisdictional authority as well as service responsibility. It also helps avoid reinforcing inconsistencies between mapping records and LAFCO's official boundary determinations. And now to wrap up our presentation, I'll finish out with covering the proposed recommendations that we've covered in the municipal service review. Alrighty, and the first tied to the aforementioned extraterritorial or out-of-area services. So we are recommending that the district evaluate whether it's appropriate for them to continue providing services to these three parcels. As we noted earlier, these parcels do lie within the, they lie outside of the district's jurisdictional boundary, and our review further suggests that they are within the boundary for the Sacramento County Water Agency, who might have the capacity and ability to provide services to these parcels. Therefore, we would encourage LAFCO to coordinate with the county and these two agencies to determine who might be the best or more appropriate service provider to these areas in the long term. And now related to that, and this ties to that residential parcel that is currently receiving out-of-area services, we are recommending that the district submit a formal request to LAFCO for approval to provide those out-of-area services consistent with Government Code Section 56133. Given we've confirmed there was no prior approval granted, and those services began in 2007. And now moving on to the other recommendations, and speaking more broadly, we believe the district should take the necessary steps to address the various deficiencies identified in the report within a reasonable time frame, which we generally have prescribed within or up to 5 years. This includes improving infrastructure planning, operational practices, and governance controls, as well as administrative oversight. In parallel, we believe that LAFCO, or recommend LAFCO, to evaluate or continue to monitor the district's progress, particularly in relation to its financial condition, and consider reassessing the status of their finances within the next 2 to 3 years. And finally, additional recommendations really just focus on strengthening the district's long-term sustainability, including implementing a capital improvement program, ensuring revenues align with expenditures through things such as a rate adjustment, additional sources of revenue, seeking those, establishing reserve policies, and exploring opportunities to improve their water supply reliability. So in summary, and just to wrap up here, these findings and recommendations presented today are really intended to provide a clear path forward to address the identified challenges with the district and to help support their long-term viability. So with that, I would like to conclude our presentation, and we would welcome any questions or comments from the commissioner group, and we appreciate your time today. I'll return it back to you, Chair Little. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose?
I'll do it.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Christy.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Christy Gerbo. You're one of your policy analysts. I wanted to capture staff's highlights on the MSR that's prepared by Carol and Tom. We appreciate all their work on this effort and on this project. We did want to highlight that after the MSR was drafted and provided to LAFCO staff for review, the district was moving forward with the Prop 218 vote and recently increased the water rates. A protest hearing was held in February of this year. Only 31 written protests were received, and that did not stop the rate increases. I just want to provide you the bi-monthly unmetered rates increased as of March 1st. It went from $40 to $90, and then it's expected to increase again on July 1st to $108. The MSR does not reflect the increased water rates, as the MSR is just a snapshot of the district, and it's too soon to determine how the increased rates will impact the district as a whole. At the last commission hearing, a 30-day comment period was open for the review of the MSR. Staff only received one comment from a resident that opposed allowing the district to remain as is. That comment was attached to your staff report as attachment C. A notice of exemption was prepared pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act. As this is only a study with no effect on the community or the environment. And with all this, staff is recommending the Commission receive and discuss the MSR, reopen the public hearing and receive any additional comments, accept the CEQA NOE designation, adopt the resolution LAFC 2026-05, adopting the MSR and SOI for Florin County Water District, and direct the EO to complete the necessary filings and transmittals. We're available for any questions that you might have, and as well as the district is in the audience as well.
Does the district have any comments?
Good evening, Chair Little and members of the Commission. I'm Jeff Mitchell. I'm the General Counsel for Florin. I don't want to take a lot of your time. We did submit a comment letter. That comment letter is in your packet. It also incorporated by reference previous comments we've made. We do think there are some inadequacies in the MSR, as we've identified. I do want to focus on some positive things, though. I appreciate the reference to the rate increase, which was just approved. That is a huge step for the district that will generate on the order of $4.5 million in fairly short order to address both installation of meters and address PFAS and TCE issues. So that is very significant. Also want to highlight that the district does have a draft master plan, which is under review. It'll be presented to the board at its April meeting, and we expect the board to approve that sometime shortly thereafter. That will then drive planning. That planning work includes contracting with Forsgren to serve as the district engineer, and they are already working with the district to both figure out how to implement that capital improvement plan and as well as seek additional funding, for example, from the State Water Resources Revolving Fund. We're looking for an application for a planning grant. So we're taking significant steps forward. I appreciate the fact that the MSR is a snapshot in time, but our point is the district is not static. We continue to move forward. We have made incredible progress, I believe, even since the work that was done to put the MSR together. I think another thing that the rate increase will accomplish is some significant pay increases, which we acknowledge we're behind on. The district did have a study done a couple of years ago. We have implemented that. The first implementation took effect March 1, and a second increase will take effect following the beginning of the fiscal year. So we have addressed many of those issues. I do want to make one particular point on the fire side. It sounds fairly dire, but what I'll tell you, the district experienced a 2-alarm fire in July of 2025. We reviewed the reports from that fire. There was no indication of any issue with water pressure and no complaints from residents while that fire was being treated. So while I agree that you always have to be moving forward, the reality is we had a real-world experience, not a test. And that real-world experience, there was no problem. So the district believes that providing water for fire protection is an absolutely critical function, and we will continue to do that, as well as maintaining high-quality, safe water. We are installing treatment equipment on well sites to deal with PFAS. And as I say, that rate increase will provide sufficient funds, we think, to implement a number of those measures at well sites. And generally speaking, I did want to make a mention that out-of-area service that is provided, it's important to note that the reason the district provided those is because when those businesses opened and when the post office moved in, there was no one willing to provide service. And so the district was asked and agreed to extend its service lines to provide that service at considerable expense to the district. So while we're willing to talk about changes if that's appropriate, we would expect that there would be some compensation to the district for the service, for all the work that was done to increase those services and maintain that service over time. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. And with me is General Manager Emmett Leggett and one of our board members as well.
Any questions? Commissioners?
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Oh, okay. Please.
Excuse me, before you go, the first thing that hit me, I'm actually on the board of the Sacramento Suburban Water District, and so I have some background in this. I can't see any reference to the liability insurance coverage for the district, and that can be quite important for a water district. The liability of a large break can be seven figures, and it can result in injury depending upon the damage to the road. What insurance coverage does the district hold?
Good question. I don't know, Edmund, do you or Don?
We do hold liability.
Hello, I'm Dawn Leggett. I'm the office manager for Florin County Water District. We do hold liability insurance through Glatfelter, also AIG, and we have all the coverages for our office, all our well sites, all of that.
That wasn't reviewed as part of the study, though. I don't believe the consultant looked at that at all.
I don't believe there was anything.
So I'm somewhat familiar with Aqua JPIA coverage. That's what we have. I don't know how that compares to what you have, but certainly the cost of the coverage and the liability, the maximum and all, it really needs to be looked at. And so that's something that I would like to make contingent upon approval of this, that somebody take a look at the insurance coverage and make sure that it is adequate. I understand that you believe it is, but I do believe that it has to be reviewed. That was one question. I also want to comment that one fire does not an adequate system make. So a hydraulic study is certainly appropriate to find out which of these hydrants that failed the metro tests can be upgraded to pass the metro tests. So I'm certainly hoping that that becomes part of your capital improvement program to get those hydrants up to snuff. I really do think that's important.
And I don't believe any of the hydrants failed the test. So there is some, and you'll see it if you read through the comments, both the comments from March 10th, but more relevant, the longer comments that we provided back in October. We have some disagreements with the assessments that were made based on conversations that the general manager had with Sac Fire, or Sac Metro Fire.
Yeah, I did review the comments that you made, and I did find the review that said hydrants did fail the Sac Metro test. I didn't see anywhere that you disputed that.
One of the hydrants, I'm sorry, my name is Edmund Leggett, I'm the general manager for Florin County Water. One of the hydrants in question that they questioned failed was also used to fight the fire, and they had no issues with that fire hydrant.
So I think the short answer is we're not ignoring the comments, and we appreciate Mr. Kennedy's review and his long years of experience. And that is something that will be reviewed as part of the capital plan. It is part of the review. And the district we're not going to just ignore those comments. And that's why I'm not taking a combative approach here. We have some issues with some of the comments that were made, but on balance, we appreciate the observations. There was some legitimate criticism, particularly of past practice. I think the district has moved substantially forward, and that's the goal.
I did see a lot of progress in your comments, and from what I could tell, the review was done as you were making improvements, and so a lot of the improvements weren't really included in the review, and I do understand that, and I appreciate the fact that you're moving forward. For me, I would like to see periodic reviews. I think 5 years is way too long to go and just say, fix everything. Fire flows are too important. A lot of the SCADA that's been implemented at other agencies is done to save labor. If you're doing daily, really daily, you've got overtime on the weekends, and that can be expensive. A SCADA system can pay for itself in saved labor. If you're not doing the runs, then you run the risk of having things incorrect for a long period of time, like the intertie valves went. So I'm just saying it isn't always the capital cost. Sometimes it's the labor savings too. Those kinds of things you have to decide. I understand that. But for me, I would like to see some periodic reviews of progress on the order of a year or so, just to make sure that everything continues to progress. That's just my opinion.
Commissioner Hume?
Thank you, Chair. How long have you been the counsel for the Water District?
I've been counsel for the Water District for a number of years, but to be honest, until a couple of years ago, we were contacted once or twice a year, and we had very little involvement with the district. Our involvement with the district has increased substantially in the last couple of years, as in part because of some of the things that were identified in the grand jury report, dysfunction on the board, which we will openly acknowledge. I think I can't claim credit, but I believe we were helpful in trying to get the district past those points to a more stable governance structure, a more consistent compliance with open meeting laws and transparency laws, the Prop 218 process. The prior rate increase was overturned by the court in part because it wasn't properly documented. This time, the district hired the right experts to put together a good, solid rate study, follow the Prop 218 process carefully, adopt the appropriate resolution for the objection process. So we feel very confident that these rates will stand and receive very few objections, and as was noted, very few protests. So we're quite confident that that revenue source is going to be there for the future. We will continue to review the capital improvement requirements. There could be a need, frankly, in the next few years to go back again for another rate increase. That's a possibility. Nobody wants another rate increase, but the board, I think, is prepared to accept that if that's what's necessary in order to implement the changes that need to be done.
Okay. That was a very thorough answer. Thank you. I want to go back to how you began the answer, though, is that you were counsel while all of this happened. And first of all, I've never met any of you folks, so please don't take offense like I'm attacking you personally. I'm trying to get to the bottom of what is a very messy situation, and it takes a long time to dig a hole, and so it can take a while to climb out of it. I appreciate that. But I'm just curious how the counsel for the district can lose a court case because the process wasn't followed correctly and have a pretty scathing grand jury report and only have interface once or twice a year. I don't understand how that comes to be.
With all due respect to the district, I think those two answers are connected. Some of what was identified in the grand jury report, I think, was a function of not having consulted with us. We are a private law firm, so we get paid when we get called. There was a mindset under prior administration that attorneys were not necessarily needed. The district could run fine on its own. And the district runs well on its own. But I think this administration, both Edmund and the board, recognizes that we're in a different world than we may have been in 20 years ago. It's a more complicated world. There's a lot more requirements. There's a lot more statutes that have to be complied with. You unfortunately need to spend more money on consultants, including lawyers. I think they've made tremendous steps in the sense of hiring both a professional firm to act as district engineer, which they haven't had. I think the staff is well trained, but they are not engineers. And so that is an important step. I think hiring a KEL to do their master plan is an important step. In the past, the district was a little too self-reliant on its own expertise in-house. And I do believe that that is a change that has occurred over the last couple of years and is reflected both in Edmund's leadership and in the board's leadership.
And so then the previous rate increase and the issues that are pointed to in the grand jury report, I know there's been a lot of turnover at the district, both in leadership as well as in the board. Were those previous iterations of both or either?
I'm not sure I'm following. The previous
Did all of
rate-
these things
yes.
happen
So the previous
before?
rate- right. The previous rate increase as an example, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. So I think there was a belief.
I think we're at a point somebody needs to be, because it's a matter
Okay.
of whether we got here because of people who are no longer doing what they were doing, or do we need to step in and
So
you're hanging on by your fingernails,
Yeah.
or at least according to this report, and that's not a good position, and that's exactly what we're up here to determine, is whether or not you should be allowed to continue or whether someone else needs to step in.
Right, fair enough.
So
All right,
I implore you to be candid,
Okay,
sir.
so to answer your question, the prior rate increase was not supported by a rate study. And documenting that the basis for that rate increase in a court setting, which we defended, was very difficult and ultimately unsuccessful. The court expected there to be documentation to say, why was this rate increase appropriate? The difference this time around is knowing that outcome, the district hired an expert to do a proper rate study. And I think that's been a world of difference, both in terms of understanding, in terms of the public outreach, the public process that went on, the fact that while you did get protests, and we always get protests to rate increases, but the protests were relatively small, and it was not a strong vocal protest. There were not people complaining that they had no idea why the district had increased rates. We were able to point them back to the rate study and to the Prop 218 notice to support the basis for those. It's still early. The rate increase only went into effect on March 1, but I believe it is solid and that will withstand if there's a legal challenge, and I don't anticipate there will be one.
And I can appreciate all of that, and that's certainly a very important issue, is the financial solubility of the district. But in looking at some of these findings from the grand jury, the conduct of the meetings, the lack of the transparency, the website, delayed action, leadership instability, I'm trying to, are those folks still in place in the leadership of this district?
You have an entirely different governing board.
Okay.
You have a new general manager. You have professional staff and professional consultants who have been retained. The district has accepted the need to reach out and bring in expertise. Every district needs expertise. I don't know of any water district that can survive.
I agree, and that's why the 1 to 2 times a year, I mean, I'm assuming because you were a contracted attorney, you had no fiduciary responsibility as far as the adequacy of the leadership or the reporting coming out of the district. Is that true?
I take some moral responsibility
Sure.
for not engaging more, but honestly, we only know what we're asked. I mean, we only know when we're contacted. And so when my conversations with the prior general manager were mostly about family and how things are going, and not much at all about the substance of the district's operations. I represent a lot of clients. some fairly large. I'm the city attorney for West Sacramento, but some are fairly small. Florin is on the fairly small side. And the service we provide is driven by the requests that we receive. We don't typically go and seek out work from clients. I will say with Florin, that attitude has changed. We were very involved in the 218 process. We've been very involved in increasing the transparency issues of dealing with adoption of policies. One of the things that I think may have been referenced in the MSR was no reserve policy. The district now has a reserve policy that was approved or signed off on by their accounting firm. We are continuing to work. There's more work that needs to be done, but we are continuing to move forward.
And I can appreciate that, and I appreciate, as was mentioned, that this was a snapshot in time. This will be my last question, and I apologize for the sensitive nature of this question, but it's been brought to me, and so therefore I need to ask it to make sure there aren't any issues there. Should we have any concern at all that the last name is shared by the general manager and the office manager?
That's a fair question. The district does not have an anti-nepotism policy. Both Edmund and Don have worked for the district for a long time. We have implemented policies to separate responsibilities so that there is intervening individuals. The two of them are not, for example, the only two people who sign off on financial transactions. So we are mindful of that, and at the board's direction, implemented policies to do more of that separation. So I am reasonably comfortable that the policies that are in place now make sure that that should not be an issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Kaplan.
Thank you. Just want to follow up a little bit on what my colleague asked, and just go to the nature of, the one comment that was submitted, and want to hear what your answers are. The accusation that the board has voted not to buy water meters on 3 separate occasions at their board meetings. Can you explain that?
I think, and Evan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I have been at most board meetings over the last couple of years, not absolutely every one. I believe that is a function of the dysfunction that was occurring several years ago. There was strong disagreement on the part of some of the former board members as to whether there was a need to be buying meters in advance of the deadline when meters have to be, installation of meters has to be completed. And from our perspective, and I think Edmund agrees, yes, that can't be the case. We can't just suddenly buy them and install them overnight, right? So we have to have a process to acquire them over time and begin an installation process to meet the statutory deadline. I think that's what they were talking about.
And so when they say that you will not activate these meters until 2032, is that your plan with the statutory deadline?
No, that is a misunderstanding. I can't swear that somebody didn't say that at some meeting in the past, but that's not what we've talked about. We've talked about installing them, activating them as they are installed. I mean, it may come in tranches, right? It may not be like every meter that can install get turned on instantaneously, but there will be a process.
The board is currently in the process of doing that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. I'm sorry. Yes, they are.
Would you mind expanding on that a little bit? Because this is your time to help correct the record or give us that information.
Well, installing meters was part of our CIP plan that we have, the master plan that we're going through right now. So that was implemented into that plan. We already have bids and things of that sort. So we're ready to move forward. This district is moving in a new direction, and it's a good direction.
One thing that I would add is, and Edmund and I have just talked about this in the last few days, before we start installing meters, there needs to be a public outreach process to let people know that that's going to happen. So that is one of the things we've got to talk about, and it can't be a process that takes 6 months to figure out what our outreach is, but we do need to have something. When folks start showing up in your yard or out on the street to start digging a hole and putting in a meter, folks need to understand that that's going to happen. But and so that's part of what will be occurring over the next, say, 6 months.
And then one of the things was mentioned about the location of board meetings didn't necessarily make it where people would come. Have you fixed that and found a new place to have board meetings that will allow more public participation?
We have used the community center that they are referring to. To be honest, the only reason we haven't moved our board meetings is because we don't have participation from the customers. The only time they want to show up is maybe for the Prop 218, things of that nature. But we haven't had a group show up to warrant to spend the money, I guess you could say. But we're not opposed from having the meetings at the community center. It's just at this point in time,
and I would add that historically, like many small water districts, I think there was a history of no one ever coming to a meeting. That changed in the last few years, in part because of the drama involving the board, so it got more people to come out. But having more people come out has been helpful, because some of those people who began coming out are now on the board. And so I think that is something that's worth looking at. There's a chicken and egg element of, does nobody come because your place is too small, or is it just right because nobody comes? And will there be more people that come if you have meetings elsewhere? Should you consider having, maybe having quarterly meetings at a larger venue? That's the sort of thing that we can certainly talk about. I don't know that it makes sense for the district to spend the money, because they have to pay to use the community center, spend the money to do that for every meeting, but maybe a certain number of times a year it would make sense. And if you end up with a lot of people showing up, then maybe it makes sense to do it every month.
Which, my 2 cents, having been an elected official for 24 years, you should never ever say it's a good thing nobody shows up, or we keep it here because nobody shows up, because under the cover of darkness, there isn't transparency, and you end up with kind of scathing reports like this. So I will just say, took a little offense to that, because our job as elected and public officials is the highest and utmost transparency. And you should actually want people to show up, and you should want your community to be engaged. So, one of the things I would say is there maybe, 3 times a year, you have something at the community center where it's more public engagement, where you seek that feedback. But I think it's also nobody shows up because when your website is not up to date and your agenda is not compliant with state law, that's a problem.
So I will take one issue with that. That may have been an issue in the past. That is no longer an issue. Their agendas are compliant. Their agendas are posted in a timely manner. So there have been a number of steps taken. As you know, some of those transparency things are small in the sense of they don't look like a big change, but they are important. And I fully agree with you on that. And I don't think the intent was to say we don't want the public to show up. I was more saying, historically, this was a district where there weren't very many people who showed up. And you're right. I think one of the bad things that happen when that happens is it becomes a club, right? It becomes more like, just a group of folks who get together periodically to make decisions.
So thank you. Commissioners, I've listened to you, and I think along with staff recommendations, I'd be open to looking and adding the following, just by the nature of the concerns. While you are taking the right steps, I think we have to do a little bit more monitoring. That I would like to see a yearly report come back to LAFCO that gives an update on the progress of the CIP, the raises for salaries and how it's competitive. Just add in a copy, because I know you've adopted it, your reserves policy. How you go forward and identifying additional sources of water supply. I'd like the discussion to continue regarding the termination of extraterritorial services. I understand the amount of money put forth for that, but that was probably, if somebody wanted to challenge the legality of it, might win in that regard. And with that report, want to add in what my fellow commissioner said on appropriate information on insurance coverage, as well as looking at a hydraulic study. It is extremely, well, I hear what you say, all I keep hearing about is LA, Malibu, fire.
There is a hydraulic study in our master plan that's going to be coming out.
Okay, making sure that that's done and we get Metro sign off because it takes more than one fire on that. So is there anything on that I missed from us talking about? But I'd like to make sure that we add those on from whenever the final motion is made, and I'll turn that over to my other commissioners.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Commissioner Little. A little bit into the detail of what some of my other commissioners have brought forward. You had said tonight that July 1, it's going to be up to 108 for the flat rate, and that would be a $4.5 million increase. What is the timeline for that? And do you have a priority list for your CIP?
So I'm not going to try to tell you how much each year. If you were to go back to the rate study, it does have a table that explains what the accumulation of revenue would be and some prioritization of expenditures. So an increase in staff compensation was one of the high priorities, and that went into effect right March 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then there'll be an additional increase we expect in July. The next highest priorities were the PFAS and TCE treatment and meters. Those were the next two items that were identified. There's also an item in that anticipated budget, for lack of a better term, it's not really a budget, to make a contribution to the OPEB, to the unfunded liability. Just that's in I want to say like year 4 or something. So the first items that were identified as top priorities were compensation, treatment for the water system for the wells, and metering.
Mm-hmm. Does the $4.5 million come in within the first year? Forgive me for not looking at the 1020818.
It's over a period of time. The expectation is that, for example, the meter purchases will take place over the next several years. Mm-hmm. And the PFAS treatment, I think was mentioned in the report. There is one system being installed on one well, and Edmund, you can speak to.
We have already purchased 2 units. They're already paid for, and we are looking for funding for the rest of the PFAS systems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I'm not sure how to verbalize this extra concern, but it's the idea of we have a checkoff list every 6 months or maybe annually, whatever is appropriate to mark progress on the capital improvement projects that you have. That would be greatly appreciated. Help us monitor the improvements that we have as goals now, and we want to see the achievements as they progress. And it would also be very, very important to be able to respond to requests from the fire marshal, from Metro Fire, to be in close contact with that office so that these updates and improvements can be noted. Again, snapshot in time, MSR, but now we need more than just a snapshot. We would like to be able to document progress, and we appreciate everyone's work on this. Thank you.
I will say that I believe this is an accurate statement. Now that the rate increase has been approved, part of the budget process for this year's budget will be that long-term planning. I think there was a certain feeling of let's not get the horse out in front of the cart. Let's make sure that, or the cart in front of the horse, I guess. Anyway, let's make sure the horse is moving down the road. And now that it is, we're in a position to do some of that planning together with that CIP that we've got a draft of. And I do want an opportunity. This is. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Edward Taylor. I'm one of the directors. I've just got elected 2024. And so one of the things I would like the commission to know is that I'm a former state project manager. I installed the queuing system for the DMV. So one of the things that I've learned is that this is a cultural change that has had to occur, because we had folks that were dealing with these systems that didn't know the systems. We have folks that were acting as government officials who didn't understand government. What people don't realize in these special districts is that someone like myself, who's just an ordinary person on the couch, came to a meeting. They said, hey, we need the help. I put my name in, came in, and we did the help. But you have to use your expertise for the system, for the people. And that was not the focus. So now what we do is we have forecasting meetings, we have project management meetings. So all the things you're talking about, there are sections that we sit down and we try to get with the general manager and the office manager, and we try to provide some kind of a script for them to go through and follow, so that we don't have this undocumented course of action, and that we know where we're going. We provide a roadmap now. So that's one of the big differences, is that there's more professional leadership and more professional contact being involved into the district. So I thank you for your considerations.
Commissioner Wickert.
Just quickly, I'm glad that we have a project manager on the board. That's excellent. I've worked with Forsgren before. I know they know how to make a schedule. I would expect that they have a schedule for this CIP, a schedule for the meters, and I think that should be part of the periodic review with LAFCO. Thank you.
So I will make a motion to close the public hearing, yes, because this is open and close the public hearing, but add into staff recommendations a monitoring yearly update to LAFCO that includes the CIP, which the CIP should have the project checklist and timeline, updates on staff raises, the established reserve policy, identification of additional sources of a water supply, the notification or showing that there is adequate insurance coverage, as well as update of the hydraulic study to show that there is the systems can handle, the fire hydrants can handle if there is a fire, as well as the process in terminating the external services. Did I miss anything? Any questions? Any clarification needed by staff? Okay.
No, Commissioner Kaplan, I think you covered the items that you spoke of earlier.
Okay. So that's my motion.
Second.
All right. Let's vote.
You may vote. Your motion passes with the additions from Commissioner Kaplan unanimously.
All right, thank you. And I have to apologize. I missed on the initial, I don't know, it may be a moot point at this point, but we had somebody who wanted to speak to item 8 on the consent agenda from the public. Mark Velasquez.
So Mark let me know, Mark Velasquez did want to speak on consent item 8. He unfortunately had to leave, but he was going to speak in support for those who have been on. He has brought up the cemetery districts and then lack of plot space, so he wanted to just come and speak in support. So I want that reflected in the record.
Okay, thank you. Will the clerk read the next item, please?
Mr. Chair, item number 10 is report on the selection of the public member to LAFCO. Jose Henriquez, Executive Officer.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, this is the last year of the term for Commissioners Little and Commissioner Murphy. And that indicates basically that triggers a process to select the next public member to LAFCO. The staff report goes into more detail of what the process is, but that essentially means noticing, sending out notifications to both the public and to the special districts, or to all the agencies in Sacramento County. And then recruitment, if you have multiple candidates, possibly interview them and you review their credentials. And the 6 commissioners appoint the public and alternate members. In this LAFCO, you have the terms of both public members to be concurrent with each other. So you would be appointing both at the same time. In researching this item, we found, unfortunately, an issue that we did not anticipate, and that is that in 2011, the Commission implemented term limits for public members, meaning that for the alternate and the regular members could only serve 2 terms, 2 consecutive terms, and then they would have to be basically termed out. This is the last year of the second term for both Commissioners Little and Murphy. So the quandary that we had here internally with staff was that the policy was adopted, but it was never incorporated into your policies, procedures, and standards. So the Commission has not had an opportunity to review that policy since its review back in 2014. That was the last time this Commission considered it. Because that policy was never incorporated into the PSPs, you recently approved the PSPs in 2024, and that policy essentially is not there. So you have not had an opportunity really to review and determine whether or not it really should be there. From a legal standpoint, because it's not incorporated into your current PSPs, the policy is no longer in effect. However, like I said, because it was inadvertently left out, this is not a decision that the Commission has made. So this item requests essentially to provide direction to staff relating to where does this policy stand, and if the policy remains in effect, to incorporate it into the PSPs, and then determine whether or not you want to continue it, or whether you want to essentially say this policy has been overridden and we will continue with the recruitment process as normal. If you make a decision today, it provides sufficient time to go through the process as been done in the last 3 recruitments prior to 2022. If you want to deliberate some more, we can continue it back in June, but then the deadlines become more compressed. But they're still doable to appoint public members at the December meeting so that they can begin their term in January of 2027. I'll be happy to answer any more detailed questions, but that is in essence the summary of the quandary that we unfortunately find ourselves in. Like I said, if staff had known about this policy, it would have been part of your PSPs and when the Commission refreshed them in 2024. But here we are.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Kaplan.
Thank you, Chair. I think, mistakes happen, but it's fortuitous that it allows us to have like a conversation in this regard. I do a little bit of, should we have term limits? Should we not have term limits? Experience is good, but we should always give public a chance. So I'm wondering if my fellow commissioners maybe like a certain compromise. The legislature says 12 years. Maybe we should have our public members that we can update our term limits and say that public members can serve 12 years, but that we should always do the open recruitment process every 4 years, because that allows the public body to participate and whomever is on the commission at that time to deliberate. And I think that might split the hairs of allowing us to continue forward how we are, but also allow public members to apply if they want a shot, but keeping the balance on having experience, where I think 8 years sometimes is too short and the legislature does 12, that might be a good compromise. But I'm also open to no term limits.
Commissioner Hume.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious, irrespective of the omission in the previous iteration of the PSPs, has there been a time since the 2011 adoption or since the 2014 contemplation where the two-term limit has been exceeded by a public member?
So my understanding, based on my review of the records, was that the commission adopted it in 2011, and the public member serving at the time would have been eligible, but they suspended the enforcement to allow for that public member to be reappointed for an additional term. And in 2014, the public member at the time chose not to be reappointed. So there was never a position for the commission to say, your term is up, you're done.
Okay, so then was there a public member preceding Mr. Little who only did one term?
He did less than the full term. I believe he left 3 years into the term. And so Commissioner Little was the alternate at the time. And so he served in place of that public member. He served out the remainder of the term. And then since then, Commissioner Little has been appointed as the regular public member.
Mm. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Commissioner Wickert.
Thank you, Chair. I like Commissioner Kaplan's suggestion, but I am also open to not having term limits. So it's both suggestions sound pretty good to me, just so you know where I am. Thank you.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you. I'm in favor of not having term limits because every 4 years we can have a review and we can have an open nomination. So I would rather err on the side of openness and have it have no term limits, but also that every 4 years we go through the process. I'm sorry that would be more work for staff, but I think that openness is very, very important. The amount of time it takes to understand lots of the issues that come here, it takes time. And quite frankly, I'm very impressed with Commissioner Little because it takes a lot of time to digest Cortese, Knotts, Hertzberg. It just takes a lot of time. And then with the local influences and nuances that happen, it's very, very challenging. And there's not a substitute for the experience and the examples of issues that do come before this commission. So an open process with no term limits is my preference.
Thank you. Have you speaking again? Okay. Okay.
I did cue in a second time.
Okay.
And I appreciate the comments relative to experience, and I too like the sort of compromise suggestion. And now I'm going to say something that might be a little unpalatable. The public member at the time for why this policy was put into place was a problem, and he would not give up his seat. And he would not have given up his seat had he not been forced to. And so that's an issue. And I like Commissioner Little. I think he does a great job. He could stay here as long as he wants to. But anytime you have a situation wherein it takes a very uncomfortable meeting in an uncomfortable situation to do something that people are asking to be done, to the extent we can avoid that, I think is a good thing.
Commissioner Jones.
No, thank you, Commissioner Hume. That was the issue. However, it seems that if it is open for the commission to appoint every 4 years, that eliminates the idea of an incumbent automatically filling that seat. Is that what we're speaking to? Yes, I remember the variety of issues that occurred in 2011, 2014. And my thinking is that if the public seat is open for nominations every 4 years, that takes care of the need for term limits, in that it is a fresh discovery a fresh look at the public seats each and every time by the commission. That seems to alleviate that problem of somebody not wanting to leave. Well, you have to stand for election. You have to run for election again, just like myself and any other special district commissioner. So I don't really see I think that is a compromise to show that we can review this every 4 years, and then the commission decides. And that would be in lieu of term limits, especially if we get some very conscientious, professional, public interests. And yet, anyway, I think I've made my point. Let's just make it an annual 4-year thing. And if the commission decides to keep the people on, that's the decision.
Speaking of annual, Commissioner Desmond wanted to know if he could have his appointment reviewed annually.
Well, it should be every 6 months, really, with 1 to 10 evaluation.
Commissioner Wickert, did you have anything?
I think that what Commissioner Jones is suggesting is no term limits. And that's what I meant by I am open to no term limits. That way there would be nomination and an election every 4 years. And if the existing incumbent is reelected, so be it. That's what I meant by I'm open to no term limits. So I agree with your approach.
Special districts, there we go.
Well, then I guess I'll go back to, I respect Commissioner Hume, and I have a little bit of maybe glasses half full hope that if there is a difficult public matter member, that commissioners can make the hard decision, because sometimes politicians don't like doing hard things. But let's hope that if that ever shows up, they can. I will move forward that we will not update our term limit policy, but put in place that every 4 years we do a public recruitment interview process for the public member and alternate.
And I support that motion. And then it's very much more equal, same as special districts, same as public member.
Is that
Mine was a motion, hers was a second.
okay? So we
Well, I believe that was a motion, right? Yeah. Motion in a second?
motion. We got a second. Okay.
I did make a motion.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, we do not have any public comment for this item.
We have
and
any
let the
public
record
comment?
reflect, we had no public comment for item 9 as well.
I can give you public comment. I'm the public member. I can give you public comment. since you've been talking all about me, basically. But
Okay, you may vote. Your motion with the additions passes unanimously, 7-0. Mr. Chair, item 11 is discussion and potential for taking a position on LAFCO's role in SB 802 Ashby or on the legislation.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I'll make this very quick. I had a conversation with the lead consultant for Senator Ashby. She will be taking the LAFCO portion out of the bill. And as a result, I believe that we just maintain that watch position, but not take any position on the legislation.
Do we need a motion to keep the watch position, or just? No. All right.
It's done? Okay.
next item, please.
The next item, Mr. Chair, is item 12. Consider the report from the Personnel Ad Hoc Committee on potential separation from the County of Sacramento and provide direction to staff.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, over the past several years, the Commission had appointed a Personnel Ad Hoc Committee to review various things up to and including the classifications and the compensation levels for staff. And over the course of those discussions, interactions with the county, it's become clear that the current arrangement that the Commission has with the county may not be working as optimally as it could be. Right now, you outsource to the county personnel both the hiring and the maintenance. maintenance, the hiring and the what's the word?
Administration.
Administration, thank you, of personnel, as well as accounts payable and banking system, essentially for the county, or sorry, for LAFCO. In prior years, there were, points of contention here and there, but for the most part, the relationship worked really, really well. Over the last couple of years, it's become apparent that there are some things where, working within the county system has introduced some constraints to your commission in terms of how it wants to operate, both from an administrative standpoint, but also from a personnel standpoint. So the Personnel Ad Hoc Committee directed staff last year to essentially cost it out. What would it cost to be an independent LAFCO? As I indicated in the staff report right now, it's about a third. A third of the LAFCOs are fully independent. They're essentially a county department. Those are for LAFCOs that are smaller, that are in counties that are not as active, and they essentially become just one of the roles that a planning director or the county administrator handles as part of their day-to-day county duties. A third of the LAFCOs are fully independent, meaning that they are an entity unto itself. They are the employer. They are the account manager for their funding, and they essentially determine the staffing levels, the compensation levels, as well as keep an eye on the day-to-day expenditure of funds. The other third are like Sacramento LAFCO, where it has a partnership with another agency within the county to do either accounts payable, personnel, or both. And what I demonstrated in your packet was essentially what it would look like from a costing standpoint, so that this isn't really to save money. It's more to allow for flexibility for the commission in terms of what it wants to do. And I'll use myself as an example. Within the county structure, I hold a certain classification, and that for the longest time was not at the same compensation levels as other executive officers for similar sized LAFCOs. And your ability to navigate was really dependent upon what the classifications were within the county. And I find it very difficult to discuss this only because, well, it pertains to me. I'm not being self-serving here, I swear. But the reality is that your ability to set the compensation levels, to set the administrative level, becomes much more difficult. And another example that we had was the trying to navigate a salary, or sorry, not a salary, but a classification system, so that it is theoretically possible for somebody to start as a junior policy analyst within LAFCO and actually eventually rise to the rank of executive officer. That has happened in other LAFCOs. I tried setting that up here for Sacramento County, and I had to work within the constraints of the county, which would not allow for that kind of level of flexibility. So the bottom line is that from a costing standpoint, it isn't necessarily going to cost you more money, and it isn't necessarily going to save you a lot of money. It's just more or less you'll be breaking even. But what it does allow for you is to have some intangibles that at the moment are very difficult to maintain. So it does allow you to set the compensation levels. It allows you to set a different classification. So, for example, if you wanted to designate someone to be your assistant executive officer at the current classification levels, we can't do that. But if you were your own independent, you can set what classifications you would allow for. It would also allow you to determine what the staffing size should be. So it gives you greater flexibility in that respect, and it also gives you greater flexibility with accounts payable, which at the moment, I'll be honest, is a mixed record at best. And the other thing that I wanted to show you with the budget is that if you have your own accounts payable system, we can actually create the categories of the items that you want more visibility on. Because at the moment, I have to use existing county classifications. And if you remember from the budget discussions, right now your biggest operational cost is the other professional services. what's in that bucket? In that bucket, you have staff salaries because, again, you're compensating the county for salaries and benefits. It's also MSR costs. It's also your legal costs. And it's also any special consultants or that you want to bring in. It's all under that category. And from a public standpoint, you don't have that level of visibility. Whereas if we had our own accounting system, we can actually break that out for you so that you have greater visibility as to what goes into that category. I tried replicating that in your budget memo by stating the line items that go into the other professional services category in your last budget memo. But this is something that you would be able to get as a report from a monthly basis. I came from El Dorado County. That was a fully independent LAFCO. And I can tell you that the level of flexibility in terms of being able to respond to different circumstances, sometimes on a yearly basis, was much greater than what I'm currently finding here as I approach my 5th anniversary in Sacramento County. So what I'm requesting for this meeting is to consider the information that I've provided and provide direction to staff as to whether you want to either A, pause the effort and we just continue to make the current arrangement work better, or B, to pursue independence and start arranging for LAFCO to break away from the county and become essentially its own shop, its own employer. From a staff standpoint, it would mean that if the commission does break away and become its own employer, existing staff, if they wish to come to LAFCO, will have to resign their current county position. And they would also have to give up union representation because you wouldn't be in a position to have a union representation in that system. And essentially, staff becomes at will to the executive officer. The executive officer remains as is right now for you as at will to your commission. So that ends my presentation, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Wickert.
Thank you, Chair. How would we handle meeting support? Would that be more expensive, less expensive, different people? I mean, this is a lot of technology. How would we handle that? Thank you.
So that's a great question. Essentially, we would enter into a contract with the county and with the clerk of the board to continue the services of your commission clerk, Laurice Washington, as well as essentially compensating the county for the use of the chambers, which currently we already do anyway. It's part of the A87 costs. So the reason why your attachment A has some categories that are highlighted, those are the costs of the A87 will be dependent upon the services that we provide, that we contract with the county. And at the moment, I envision continuing our partnership with, for example, the Department of Technology. They provide excellent support. And also with the clerk of the board supervisors, which provides excellent support for LAFCO.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes, thank you. I support continuing this effort to study and perhaps approach separation. And I say that because our executive officer and his team have spent an inordinate amount of time trying to work through these challenges. With all respect to the county processes, huge organization, a lot of folks to manage. There needs to be processes in place to help manage that volume. However, when you get to a smaller group like Sacramento County LAFCO, it can become quite, and unfortunately historically it has become quite a hindrance in terms of flexibility and fulfilling the responsibility of LAFCO duties. So I would support continuing this effort.
Commissioner Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo Commissioner Jones' comments, support continuing this effort. I think that really the devil's going to be in the details when you really get into it and we find out what the costs are going to be with continuing to contract out for some of these services. That's what I'll be really focusing on. But I do agree that I think the county, very large organization, has sometimes been an impediment to this commission's ability to really make decisions about how LAFCO operates. So.
I will just echo what my fellow commissioners has said, that we need to move forward. And then while you did like a draft cost comparison, I think kind of digging into a little bit more of the details, but I'm pretty confident considering LAFCO has handled a couple separations that you have that information of what it takes to do a best look, but come back with us with more details on like the timeline and what it looks like and what it would actually be, so we could give further direction.
Any further comments?
Just wanted to add that I failed to say in my introductory remarks that this is not really this is not a disparagement on the county. It was a conversation that I had very early on with now CEO Villanueva, that essentially the county is set up because it is a large organization and it has a lot of employees with different tasks, with different responsibilities and different benefits based upon their union representation. And so the county is big for a reason, and it has its processes and its policies for a reason, because it is so large. But he conceded that essentially LAFCO, being so small, that it needed to be more nimble, and so maybe this is not a relationship that was really destined to be a long term. So I do want to thank our partners with at County DPS, at the CEO's office, at Department of Finance and DTEC, and the clerk of the board. But it is one of those things that sometimes, that parting is a sweet sorrow.
All right, thank you. We have no public comment?
We have no public
All
comments
right.
for item 12.
Our next item, please.
Item number 13 is Executive Officer Commission Council Astro Sheet Correspondence and Cal LAFCO Quarterly Report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I'll keep my comments brief, and then I'll turn it over to Policy Analyst Graybo to go over the Astro Sheet. The Cal LAFCO workshop, which is normally happens in April, is actually going to happen in the first week of May, and that is why your May meeting is canceled. So friendly reminder that you have your May free. Your next meeting will be in June. And the audit for 24-25 will also be coming to you in June, as well as the review of the existing contracts that LAFCO will be bringing into the next fiscal year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Policy Analyst Graybo.
Good evening. Just to highlight a couple things that we're working on in-house. The Sac-Sur annexation of Hood and Franklin communities will probably be coming to you guys in June, no later than August. We have the Omno-Chimney-Hartnell Water District MSR that will be coming to you as well in the summer, as well as the Elk Grove Water, Flora, and Resource Conservation MSR. Additionally, what's coming to you guys in June is the Southgate MSR. So we're busy doing a lot of MSRs. And that's all that I have right now.
Thank you. We have no public comments.
We have no public comments
Okay.
for item 13.
Thank you. Next item, Commission Chair and Commissioners.
Yes.
Any comments? No, sir. All right. Well, we'll adjourn the meeting to closed session.